Good morning, everybody, and I'm delighted to be here this morning with you. My name is Sharon Masterson, and as Quentin said, I'm from the International Transport Forum at the OECD. So a little bit about us and who we are and what we do. We're based in Paris in France. We're an intergovernmental organization with 59 member countries. We're based at the OECD, but politically autonomous. We have more members than the OECD member countries. We have a Council of Ministers of Transport and a rotating annual presidency. And our motto is Global Dialogue for Better Transport. So as Quentin said earlier, one of the key things we believe in is collaboration and dialogue amongst all the key stakeholders in transport. And our mission is to shape the transport policy agenda on a global level and to ensure that it contributes to economic growth, environmental protection, social inclusion, and the preservation of human life and well-being. As I mentioned earlier, we have an annual summit with all of our ministers of transport. This is held every year in Leipzig in Germany. This year it will be from the 23rd to the 24th of May, and our theme this year is on safety and security, so across all the modes of transport. And that theme goes through all of our work that we do throughout the year with our ministries and with our member countries. This year the presidency is Latvia, and the presidencies go from May to May each year. So Latvia this year, Korea next year, and I'm delighted to say Ireland will hold the presidency from May 2019 to 2020. So they will be chairing the Council of the Ministers of Transport in Leipzig in May 2020, and we're working with the Irish government right now to hold a conference bringing the ministries together and bringing the private sector together next year in Dublin in November. I'm in charge of the Corporate Partnership Board at the International Transport Forum. We set this up in 2013, and I suppose one of the things that's important to say is what our role is at the International Transport Forum. It is our role to give transport policy advice to the ministries and ministers of transport, so that when they're making important policy decisions, that they have insights from the private sector, so from all of you that are here today, so that they understand the impacts of the policy decisions that they will be taking. So important that they're informed ahead of taking those important policy decisions, and decisions on investment in infrastructure, for example, that are there with us then afterwards for 30 to 40 years. Great to see so many of our partners here today. I know we had Ford here yesterday, we have Nissan, we have Valeo this afternoon, and we have a very, very large representation from the automotive sector here gathered by Cartel today. With our corporate partners, we work on topics that they believe are interesting and important for policymakers to look at upfront. So we've done a lot of work on shared mobility. We've done work on autonomous vehicles. We are also doing work on connectivity, work on blockchain, and work on managing the curb, which we think will be something of great importance as shared mobility takes off going forward. And a lot of those reports are on our website. You can download them if you'd like to have a look. And we will be launching the next round at the summit in Leipzig in May. As we've heard over the last few days, there are a lot of changes happening and a lot of emerging trends. So autonomous driving, a lot of the speakers spoke about that yesterday. Zero-emission vehicles, again, a number of speakers speaking today. Big data, a big topic, and something that we believe from a policy perspective is very, very important for governments. We believe that data-driven transport policy gives the policymakers an opportunity to work with what is happening real-time out there. So when they're making a policy decision and when they're evaluating it quickly, and in terms of looking at that as fast as possible and see if it's working or not working, that's where the data comes in, and that again is where the collaboration between the private and the public sector is very, very important. And today I'm going to focus on just one of those areas, the area of shared mobility. We are facing many issues at the moment. Poor air quality, we can see it impacting human health. Quentin referred to it earlier. And we see a very, very strong growth of urbanization. This is globally, but we estimate to 2050, 2.4 billion new urban dwellers. That's quite a huge growth of 60%, and 140% growth of passenger kilometers. Here we can see it in this graph, how this is illustrated. You can see this growing 1950, 1990, and estimated to 2025. The growth will happen mainly in emerging economies. Urban travel demand in OECD countries is at 25%, down from 45% today, but mobility by car to grow 185% in non-OECD countries. There's persistent congestion, but it's also important that we understand that emerging economies are still not at the peak of their motorization, and we can expect transport volumes to increase there. A lot of these impacts stem from persistent use of, and extremely inefficient use of one of the most capital-intense investments household makes, and that is the car. Most of us use our car very limited every day. We use it, an estimate, 50 minutes of every day. That means for the rest of the 24 hours, for in excess of 23 hours every day, the car is sitting there. So what is the key message that tells us? The message is that we actually appreciate what we get from the car. We appreciate the convenience that the cars provide. But we see in this that there is a possibility to leverage this for opportunity to leverage new shared services. And there are quite a lot of those, and growing, and we see them all over the world now. And indeed, we see a growing use of these, especially with the younger generation as well. New mobility services have emerged that allow for seamless car-based transport based on sharing. Car and ride sharing are at the heart of the shared economy. Everyone is getting in on the game. Public transport operators, car manufacturers, all see a lot of potential here. So you will have read in the news about partnerships emerging with public transport operators, with car manufacturers, and they are also seeing potential in this area and looking at it and investing in it. And this is reinforced, as I said earlier, by a generation of younger people that are used to using app-based transport, public transport and other. And this is important that we bear this in mind going forward, that this is something that is really just so natural nowadays to the younger generation. So we looked at this in the International Transport Forum, and from a policy perspective said, well, what does that mean? What can that bring? And where's the potential here for societal good? So we looked at what might happen if all car and bus trips in a city, and in this instance we took the city of Lisbon, were replaced by a fleet of shared and optimally dispatched vehicles. So this is not a transition scenario. We do not explore right now how this will happen, but we just assess the range and scale of the impacts that could be expected from this type of service. Again, we took the real city with typical traffic and topology, and we used real trip data for that city, looking at origins and destinations and the time of travel. Importantly, we also use real routes to plot travel based on the shortest time and least detour to ensure the same quality of service to users. And we modeled the system so that it delivered the same, if not better quality, as today's car trips, with door-to-door convenience, with the same waiting and travel time, very importantly, with great ease of use, but without the worry of parking, which is something I'll speak about a little bit later as well. And we modeled several car configurations, because this is also important. It may not be the conventional car that is the one type of car that we use for such a service. We also looked at a shared taxi service based on the simultaneous sharing of a 6-person vehicle. This would be on-demand service and real-time optimized routes. We also modeled a taxi bus with 8 to 16 seats, and this takes passengers' requests for direct rides 30 minutes in advance. So passengers would board less than 400 meters from their origin and disembark within 400 meters of their destination. And we have also done, this is not just a modeling study, we have also done surveys of potential users of these, and it has been very, very interesting, the feedback that we have gotten from the users from these surveys. So contrary to what we might have expected, people have said they would be more comfortable using the larger shared mobility services than the smaller shared mobility services. And when I pushed a little bit about that, they said, well, If I'm traveling to work in the morning and I'm in a car with 3 or 4 people, I will feel obliged to speak to them. But if I'm in a bus with a larger group of people, that allows me the flexibility just to do nothing and not to speak to them. So it was very, very interesting. That was the feedback that we got from the study that we've done in Ireland that will be released in the next coming months. Also in Helsinki, Auckland, we've done those studies as well. So different things coming out depending on the markets. So some very, very valuable insights there. We also looked at this combined with high-capacity public transport, which is important, that we also, in the case of Lisbon, this is the metro, and we ran several different scenarios with or without, with the different services. And this is what we found. In the case of shared taxis and taxi buses combined with high-capacity public transport, it is possible to deliver the same mobility as before, and here is the interesting part. With 3% of today's vehicles. That is a huge impact. And I think there are a lot of questions being asked right now, well, how is that possible and how will that impact quite a number of other areas? So more than 9 out of every 10 vehicles could be removed from our streets with no loss in service quality. That is significant, but also consistent with other studies. We've also modeled that we would remove the need for all on-street parking. And that's very important because parking takes up quite a lot of space in our cities and towns. And we could use that for something quite different. Vehicle occupancy would change with private cars from going from 1.2, bring it to 1.2 to 2.0 to 2.0 and 2.6. So doubling, literally doubling the occupancy of cars on the streets. Not only that, but interestingly, and I think this is a very important slide for a lot of you who are here today, when we talk about reducing the number of cars on the road, but what does that mean? Well, what it means is that those cars, instead of, as I spoke earlier, being used for less than 1 hour a day, are now being used quite intensely. And that intense use means a shorter life cycle for the cars, a more rapid fleet renewal, a quicker integration of new technologies, and therefore also a reduction in CO2 emissions. And this reduction in CO2 emissions is at 34%. So that's quite a large reduction in CO2 emissions, and I think is not negligible when we discuss and when we look at the impacts of such a service. In addition, it would reduce the vehicle kilometres over a 24-hour period by -23% at peak times at -37%. I spoke about the on-street parking, and this is an opportunity to eliminate all of the on-street parking and add 20% to the curb-to-curb street space that is currently available. And also, if we think about our parks and towns and the car parks, and I know here in Killarney there are a few like this, it would eliminate 80% of the off-street parking. And that would be something that we would be able to use that space for something else. From parking to parks, or other things, like this parklet here. But there are many more uses and many other activities. In addition to what I've just spoken about with regard to the benefits of sharing and congestion, emissions, land use, we need to take a step back and ask ourselves what the greater role of transport is. And I think that's very, very important. Because the primary reason that we hop into our cars every day is to have access to things, is to have access to the important things that we do every day, education, jobs, and access to healthcare. With this in mind, and it's very important sometimes that we, when we're advising governments, just do take this step back and say, what are we trying to achieve here? And we need to look at how we can possibly even radically reorganize the mobility system to serve users in a more optimal way. It's important that we look at designing our cities from being car-oriented, and this is what happened. With the arrival of the car, we tended then to reorganize our cities and design our cities around the car, and we see that right across the world. And we need to think a little bit more about how we can include active modes of transport and walking and cycling, and increase the quality of public areas in our towns and cities. There's huge potential for this in cities yet to be built, for example in China, where we have greenfield sites where now we can decide how we are going to build those cities. I mentioned before we did several studies on the different aspects of shared mobility. So in our first study, we had the results that I've shown you previously, looking at the reduction in vehicle emissions, the reduction in congestion, and all of the other benefits. In our second study, we looked at what does this mean in terms of equity? Because as policymakers, it's very important to deliver an equitable transport system for all of its citizens. And we looked at it with that lens on in the second round of studies. And what we found, and here we have a map of Lisbon, and on the left you can see the current public transport, what the access with current public transport and walking. And on the right-hand side, and I think it's important to look at the legend over here, we would see that the large red area is now where people have greater access, and this is the one where we looked at modelling jobs, the access to jobs. We can clearly see that there's a big difference in the access that people have from the current system, where you can literally see the metro lines, to the shared mobility system, where there is more access right across. And mainly because in many cities and towns, we have an access, so that when we have to go somewhere, sometimes we have to come into the centre and go back out. But this enables a very, very flexible type of on-demand mobility solution. And so what are the policy insights that we have from this? One thing is, it's a very important message, is that the solutions for key challenges are within reach with today's technologies. And we hear a lot about technologies and everything that's coming out, and it's very, very important, and it contributes a lot to decarbonising transport. We also need to look at what business models can bring. That's very, very important. And we can embrace what's happening today in terms of what's available. And I mean, just looking outside at the exhibition and talking to some of the exhibitors there, there's quite a lot available in terms of what we can do right now and the policies that policymakers can put in place based on what's available today. But few cities are anticipating transport disruption. I mean, we've seen this in the case of Uber. All of a sudden, Uber appeared, and all we know, next thing, policymakers, hot potato, and they're all trying to deal with it, but later, not in advance of this actually happening. So this is very important that we work with our cities and that we work with our policymakers so they're aware of what is happening, not just around this corner, but around the next corner. And all of you have the insights and the information that are very, very valuable to the policymakers there. Important that everyone must adapt. I think we need to understand that mobility is a very, very fast-moving area. Our public transport is adapting. Taxis, governance must also adapt. And the overall benefits need to be linked to the system and market design. I think that's very, very important because the possibilities are out there, and it's important for the policy makers to put a framework on that and to say, yes, we understand the potential, but our job is to look at social good and be there, responsible for the citizens. So this is the framework that we want to put in place on top of the technologies and the business models and the possibilities to ensure this works optimally. We mentioned earlier the freed space. That's also something very, very important because, as you know, any void will be filled. And the minute that we have freed space, something will happen if we haven't planned in advance how we're going to use that free space. So with all of the space and all of the other opportunities that we get, we must look at locking in the benefits for the citizen and for the city dwellers and all of the people that are using the transport system and living in our cities and our countries. And with that, I'll end and I'll say thank you very much. It's been very interesting to be here, and I'm around, so happy to answer any questions at a later stage. Thank you.